Okay, so not to shift gears at all, but I have to very briefly introduce the person who needs to know introduction. I'll simply introduce him, I guess, by saying, oh, where's the picture? There. That's what he looked like when I first met him. So my relationships with people do that to them. They age over time. But we are here literally because of Mike's confidence and vision and commitment, and I would also say unbelievable courage, given the kind of crazy, complicated, inchoate thing that we're trying to do. He's stuck by our side now for 20 years, for 17 as ASU President. And so it's simply literally the case that anything we've been able to accomplish, we've been able to accomplish because of his confidence in us. So all I want to say is thanks. It's really been an amazing privilege to work for you as part of this unbelievable university that is just, it never fails to inspire. So thank you all for being part of that. Thank you, Mike, for giving me and us the privilege to help you, and Dave, maybe you can say something that will allow me to retreat without bursting into tears again.
I just want to add, this is my favorite graph. So, Mike has the habit of sending large, or at least his staff does, of sending, they're from you. I know the 3 a.m. emails are from you. And it is such a pleasure and privilege to receive those. But of those 20 meg PowerPoint or PDF files that we get, this is my favorite slide. And for those of you who are new faculty in the School for the Future of Innovation Society, you've probably seen my hand-drawn version of this. Because this is one of the things that attracts us here. This is one of the things that keeps us here. This is one of the great purposes that this university has, and it is Mike's vision. We try to implement that vision in the school with our emphasis on the values of the charter of access, excellence, and impact. But this is the purpose to which the entire enterprise is put, to bringing more people, more different kinds of people, greater access to people with lower means into the university, into the education system, so that we can take pride in their achievements, they can achieve and contribute to the larger enterprise that we have. And a lot of us in our pointy academic hats are sometimes critics of what has become known as the neoliberal university. And in some circles, ASU is one of the examples of the complications that universities get into when they create what Mike has called when they operate at the enterprise level. And this is my retort to them. This is the vision, this is the purpose. It's not so that we have, property that we manage and sell and rent out. It's so that we can create access to people who would not otherwise be part of a large, great research university. And this is what Mike has done here. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Dan and Dave. I'm sorry I couldn't be here yesterday. I had to be in San Francisco for an important meeting that I couldn't alter, and the day before that I was in New York, and then I'm heading off to Los Angeles immediately from this meeting for another meeting that I have there this afternoon. So I actually came back for this event. So it's not that I'm never here. It's not true. I'm actually here more than people would like me to be here because. So what I want to try to do today is get everyone thinking. If I can get the first slide, it's coming up. Yeah. CSPO and all things related to science, and there's an important comma, science, comma, policy and outcomes, is all about design. So most of us don't realize in academia that we inherited a design that in many ways will be seen in the long run when looking back at the design of the late 20th century, that is after World War II, until the opening of the present social revolution that we're in the early stages of, and the present environmental and ecological systems stresses that we're in the middle stages of. People will say, what were you doing over there in academia? You had unguided science. You had a socially irresponsible way of engaging with the public. You developed languages that no one can understand. You developed tools that no one can understand. You developed decision-making mechanisms by which you made everyone else feel stupid. You made everyone else feel stupid. And I can tell you, coming from a family of the supposed stupid, a working class family, I grew up in Section 8 public housing and military housing our entire life. Ended up being one of my siblings that graduated from high school, because not all of them graduated from high school. And in our family, no one was stupid, literally, including those that didn't graduate from high school. Unbelievably smart and unbelievably capable and unbelievably resentful. On Monday afternoon before graduation, we graduated 16,000 people this semester from ASU, which is twice our total graduation numbers from 2003. And we actually have 3 times the number of graduates that we had in 2003. And in 2003, we did not have graduates that represented the socioeconomic diversity of our society. We do now, both in terms of students and graduates. But on Monday, we had a thing in the afternoon called the Starbucks Cry Fest. So 4 years ago, we decided with Starbucks to actually go at a problem that was derivative of, this goes to the question of design. We found a conscious capitalist corporation called Starbucks, actually interested in human capital and human capital development, not just shareholder value and dividends. And so we we conceived of an idea wherein the 70,000 people that worked for them that went to college and didn't finish. How many of you finished college? Almost all of you. So over half the people in the United States that have attended college never finished. They have no degree. Over half the people that have received a Pell Grant don't have a certificate or a degree. There's 35 million adult Americans in the United States that went to college and didn't finish, and half of them are so angry that they even have new ideas about politics. So you can think that politics are derivative of individuals. It turns out they're not derivative of individuals. They're derivative of social drivers and social change. Some of you might be concerned about certain political outcomes that you're witnessing as we speak. That isn't actually the problem. The problem is what led to those political outcomes were social outcomes. And those social outcomes were derivative of the following, and I'll get into this in just a second. So we had this Cry Fest. Here's how the Cry Fest works. We have 12,000 students from Starbucks that are employees of Starbucks that can attend ASU. 8,000 are on degree paths attending us online, which, by the way, is a technological manifestation that most faculties around the country find abhorrent. Why would we bother ourselves with educating the unworthy, those that couldn't finish college? Why wouldn't we bother ourselves with admitting and educating people in some mechanism other than those that we handpick, including those that bribe their way into the institution? Yeah, which is humorous, but also a disaster, a social disaster. Another signal in the system that the system is badly designed. So we go to this Cry Fest, and the Cry Fest works like this. So we spend an hour and a half, senior ASU officers and senior Starbucks executives, and we listen to the stories of some of these students. I was 18 years old, I was admitted to Princeton, I was there for 1 year, my mother got cancer. I went home, I didn't check out, they flunked me out, I had no way back. I had debt from my first year, what do I do about it? That's a design problem. Kids that had health problems, kids that said, I got depressed in my freshman year, I stayed in bed. Didn't know what to do, no one could help me. I finally have it under control 10 years later. I want to go back to college. How do you go back to college when you're 28? I ask any of you, how do you go back to college when you're 28 years old? We have a quarter of our population that didn't graduate from high school. 1/4 did not graduate from high school, and half of those that did aren't really fully prepared. So we have a disaster on our hands, and I'm not even getting down to science yet. I'm just talking about educational institutions in which much of science learning is embedded, much of science creativity is empowered, much of science discovery is enabled. So I want to focus on this issue of design and this notion of the rightful place of science. But I can tell you that, we had big problems. Now, I'm an optimist and believe all of them can be solved. But here's what I think isn't the case. So just look at the past. So in the past, let's look at England. So how many universities were there in England before the year 1000 and the year 1826? 2. 800 years. In 1826, there were already hundreds of colleges in the United States. Small ones, different kinds of ones. There were 2 in England. Why is that? An elitist model built on the notion of exclusion as the mechanism to produce master thinker philosophers. I read English at Oxford. Oh, I'm really great that you did. Fantastic that you read English at Oxford. Too bad no one else got to read English at Oxford. You're going to get some of my biases here. And so in the past, universities were and remain and are, including all things related to science, elitist. Little consideration about the net outcome. Little consideration about the social impact. Insufficient self-awareness of the institutions themselves and the design of the institution itself. So when we launched CSPO 20 years ago, what I was attempting to do from my role at Columbia University as the executive vice provost at that institution and the chief research officer at that institution was, could I take one of the older bastions of discovery and help to facilitate a conscience? Now that doesn't mean that the actors in the institution lacked a conscience. They had a conscience. They were, for the most part, morally motivated individuals trying to do the right thing. They just didn't realize the cumulative impact of all the things that they were doing while producing lots and lots of benefit. Were actually creating net outcomes that needed to be more carefully evaluated at the time of the inception of the scientific undertaking, but even more importantly than that, the design of the scientific undertaking. There's a famous philosopher there that I've probably read every word that he's written that I could find, named Phil Kitcher, and read many of the words more than once, which is this notion that science without purpose is immoral. It's an immoral act leading to amoral outcomes. No one, including most of you in this room, believe that. 98 to 99% of academic scientists have no idea what I'm talking about and shut off when I say that. They can't even see it. They think that they are purely moral, purely driven by success and understanding, and that knowledge creates all wondrous outcomes. It creates some wondrous outcomes and some not so wondrous outcomes. And so the notion of the past is that, I would argue, is that the design of the university itself, the design of the scientific enterprise itself, the design and the conduct of the training of scientists and engineers by themselves, all of these things are inadequate. And some of the things that we've done at ASU, having a little bit higher sets of degrees of freedom here than at a 200-plus-year-old university with a structure that's very difficult to manage, is that we've been able to create outcome-oriented science organizations like our School of Sustainability and our Global Institute of Sustainability. We've been able to create anti-disciplinary entities like the School for the Future of Innovation in Society. I consider that to be anti-disciplinary. Disciplines are constrainers. We've been able to create whole new ways to think about getting women and minority students into engineering. So 10 years ago, we had 8,000 on-campus engineering students. This year, we have 18,000 on-campus engineering students. We have several times the number of women, several times the number of minority students in engineering. And so why is that? It's about the design, not about the desire or the will. It's about the design of the actual enterprise itself. We did away with all 11 regular engineering departments, maintained them as degrees, built grand challenge-oriented engineering departments, changed the culture embedded underneath that school, a mechanism which actually said that I think that perhaps you might be able to be a great engineer if you want to be a great engineer, regardless of whether or not your math score is 750 on the SAT test on some given Saturday in the junior year of your 16th year of life, junior year of high school. And so if you can rethink things from design, that means now we have 18,000 on-campus engineering students. We had a 68% freshman retention rate when we started this design process. We have a 90% freshman retention rate in engineering now. And oh, by the way, we built this technology platform, which was this great empowerer and enabler, which is thought upon by others. I actually tell people this. So we have an online double E degree, bachelor's degree in double engineering, undergraduate online degree. Unless you were a part of building it, I've not met one person that doesn't doubt it from the second that I utter the sentence. How can they do that? Do they spend any time on campus? What about this? What about that? I said, well, you're probably not a 27-year-old electronics technician sitting on an aircraft carrier off the coast of North Korea, trying to do what people are telling you to do, but you also wanted to be an electrical engineer, and you have every asset necessary to be an electrical engineer, and you're just looking for a way to do that. So it turns out we built tools and systems and designs and so forth, and it was almost humorous this week when among competing teams of electrical engineers competing on a design question to see if they could win a prize, that the team that won were all online students. And so this past is a past in which we are rigid, we are not thoughtful enough, we're not thinking about our purpose and so forth and so on. So I'd like to show you this video right now about what a redesign project looks like at the university level and then what that can mean then for science.
One of the things I noticed in my travels around academia was this increasing separation from society. You know, harder and harder to translate what the university was doing, harder and harder for kids that were hard-working kids with B averages from high school to find a pathway. What we have found, and this is something that I learned the hard way here myself, was that we, the educators, have been those that have created these disparities. We've created these disparities by not figuring out how to educate across the spectrum of our society. We narrow, we pick, we select. So long as we do that, we're going to get these very disparate outcomes. And so we're trying to work against those outcomes.
When we say an institution that's accessible and defined by who we include and not exclude, what we're also saying is that we're an institution that represents the world.
We can talk about individual potential, but without thinking seriously about systems attached to that, it's not really going to work. Because it's not really true that anyone can grow up and be anything. So some kid whose parents are Rhodes Scholars fundamentally has a different pathway to life and success than some kid who's working at McDonald's.
We're ensuring that those that are ready are able to participate, regardless of ethnicity, background, zip code, resource, lack thereof. Kids are able to be on this campus and make it their own and understand that they can go to college, they can graduate from college, and they can find viable careers to sustain themselves and others.
A public university takes on a social objective, a social change and economic change objective, trying to find a way at scale to impact society at large.
The challenges societally and globally are so significant that if we are not an institution that is playing a critical role in solving those problems, then we are not going to be relevant for the long term.
In everything that we do, we ask ourselves the question, what can we do better for humanity? And take our role in society to be one where we are here to serve.
We engage our students at all levels and our faculty in developing new knowledge, new solutions, new designs that are really going to make a big difference in the big areas that the world needs right now.
We want our scholarship, our research, and our output to have an immediate benefit at a local level to solve a problem right here. Even bolder, to say, hey, can our graduates, can our work at this institution have an impact upon the 7 billion? So that's in our lexicon, that's in our language, and it is in our culture.
I'm trying to find every means, every tool, every innovation we can possibly create to now take that notion of the success of the individual student and then apply that to every person that we touch, furthering the development of our society, furthering the development of each and every individual in our society. If we can pull that off, then we have figured out what a public university is supposed to be.
So we we call this the charter video. This is a newer version of that, which we did a couple years ago. And the purpose for showing it to you is to give you some sense of the process by which rethinking design begins. And so it starts with purpose. What is your purpose? Why are we here? So in this charter, I'll go to that slide in a second. In this charter, in this video, I say we the educators have created disparities. That goes not just social disparities, not just income disparities, not just outcome disparities, but awareness disparities. We have a democratic republic attempting to advance, and we're doing a poor job of advancing that republic right now because we, the scientists, we, the academics, haven't figured out how to communicate. And so, educate across the spectrum of society doesn't mean just the chart that Dave put up, which we're working very hard to make certain that we have students from every background that are here, every family background. Educate across the spectrum of our society. The 3 million truck drivers that may be impacted by autonomous vehicles in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, we better do a good job communicating with them on how to advance their lives and their intellectual development and their personal development and their participation in the democracy. I said to some folks up at Stanford a few weeks ago when I was up there giving a talk, and I'm going up there again next week, I'm brought along as the little monkey to talk about, the new kinds of models. And so up there, the last time I was a monkey up there, I tried to outline for them that we didn't figure this out. There'd be pitchforks, tar, and feathers awaiting all of us in academia. There's even signs of that occurring right now. The taxing of large endowments by Congress last year. We came within a hair's breadth of having all graduate student tuition benefits taxed to the student. You know what the reason for that was? I don't know who those brats are that are working in those labs at the university, but they're nobody special. Why did they get a special benefit and the rest of us don't? Brat was the word I was told by a senator of the United States. And that's because people are angry. We need to accept their anger because we created this. We actually created the disparities. How could we not have created the disparities when in fact at the top of the pile of academic or scientific institutions is the notion of we are better than everyone else and we'll select very carefully who's going to be a part of what we are and what we're doing. And so if you want to rethink science, you got to go all the way back to the design of science itself, which goes back to why CSPO was put in place. Can we get science and outcomes connected? This same logic you might see is appearing now in the design of this university. This same logic is appearing in the design of some of the things that we're evolving. This same logic is appearing in our openness and willingness to reconsider the intellectual framework from which we're advancing. Now we're surrounded by thousands of other institutions. Oh, one reaction we got to the video that was kind of funny. Those were all actors. Meaning the pictures, not the speakers. Every person in that picture, in that video, is a staff person or a student at ASU. Every person. We're told when we win great academic awards or great research awards, there must be some fluke. And so, imagine it's not 1780 or 1787 or 1790 where the level of scientifically driven and technologically driven change is actually slow or small. It's 2020, roughly. And going forward, if you want this republic to work, and if this republic is in fact an example of what a human evolutionary moment is, derivative of the Enlightenment and derivative of the Age of Reason, which our country is a derivative of, then we better figure something out that we haven't figured out, which is how to fully engage the citizens of this republic through education in where we're going, scientifically, technologically, and thus, as a result of that, where we're going overall. So Cicero, before he was assassinated, which seems to be a common outcome, at least in the Roman Republic, or the fledgling Roman Republic, or whatever they thought of themselves as, he said that I criticize by what I create. So we're criticizing by the existence of CSPO. We're criticizing by the design of ASU. We're criticizing as we move forward in ways that you can't even begin to imagine the level of flack that we're taking for the things that we're doing, the level of attacks that are both against us and work to undermine us, because this isn't supposed to be the way that it works. So everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. Do we have the preferred outcomes from our collective scientific and technological undertaking? I sure as hell hope no one in this room says yes, because we got a problem. We got 1/3 of the American population, 110 million people, where there is not a single positive indicator in their life. Educational attainment is going down. Lifespan is going down. Income is going down in that population. 110 million people. So therefore, whatever we designed as our social structure, as our science policy design, whatever we designed, apparently didn't work. It didn't work well enough. Oh, and the upper third, by the way, there are no negative indicators. Lowest crime rate in the world, highest rate of income growth in the world, highest income in the world, highest rate of educational attainment in the world, all in the same place. So Fuller says you never change things by fighting the existing reality. You build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Therefore, argument is less important than doing it. So somebody said we need more women in engineering. And if we had more women in engineering, maybe we would get a broadening of views, a broadening of perspectives, a different technological set of outcomes. Well, there's no amount of discussion about that allows that to happen. You have to build a new model. So it turns out that one of the things that's missing is a new model for science. We have an old model for science. The model is a self-serving model. It's not a bad model. It's an incomplete model. It's an immature model. It's a post-war manifestation of the non-physicists being so overwhelmed by the power of science to win the victory that saved the Republic from the fascists, and that is what was at stake. Would the democracies survive against the fascists? That is what was at stake. I don't need to remind you if you're not familiar with the history, it was that. And science was a critical element in defeating the fascists. And then we didn't know what to do with it. We kept it turned on, full force, hoping that it would continue to produce for us, as it has in many cases, tremendous outcomes. But the design itself, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. You must build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Back to someone that has put a lot of stuff together in terms of science itself. This is somebody speaking 70 plus years ago in a highly simplistic model that's embedded even in most of your heads. I see some of my students from this semester in the class, from this semester that Dan and I had. That would be the operative incoming frame of reference of almost every college student or graduate student in the country, that this is how the world works. And this is how the world partly works, but it's an incomplete thing. So, but then he went on to say, science by itself provides no panacea. It can be effective in the national welfare only as a member of a team. How is it a member of a team? How do you make science more democratic? Really hard. Maybe even in some ways impossible, in a classic sense. Perhaps what non-scientists need to do is to articulate the world that they wish and hold people like scientists and others accountable for that world. Like, I'd actually like a world where income does not determine your lifespan. Income does not determine your infant mortality rate. Cancer treatments are equally available to everyone, which they can't be if they are infinitely expensive. So the president. Yes, that can be my last slide. Not only as relevant as ever, even more so than we thought 20 years ago. Now, this is a long haul thing. This is not even a middle distance run. This is a marathon. And if we can't figure out through CSPO or CSPO related things how to put out ideas that alter the way that people think, we won't be successful. Because the inertia and the momentum of the existing system, the existing enterprise is too large. Everything's changing, as you know. This is the rate of knowledge growth. We don't even understand it anymore. I was in San Francisco yesterday with a bunch of Silicon Valley investors, making a presentation to them, and I got to talk to several of them, 3 of whom were billionaire type founders of these kinds of companies. And they're like, yeah, pretty soon, just the storage of all this stuff is going to take half the electricity in the country. They can't build Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or Microsoft this or Microsoft that fast enough. They can't hire people fast enough. What does all that mean? I had measles a lot when I was a kid. But that's not a picture of me. How do we educate? How do people understand? Now, if you don't know what that is, you haven't been paying attention. Those are different fragmentations of a wall, believing that that's the best solution for how 2 republics built on the same premises of democracy and the same democratic ideals should interface with each other. If you haven't read the Mexican Constitution of 1917, particularly Article 3 of that Constitution, you ought to read it. If you haven't read the Mexican Declaration of Independence, you ought to read it. These are sisters and brothers that share the same exact ideals of what our country is striving to be, they're attempting to be, and we're down to this. Now, you might say, what does this have to do with science and technology? Everything. People are too ignorant to understand all kinds of other ways that this could be done, where you could manage a border in a different kind of way. And the reason that you get resistance, people think there's just stupid people in Congress. They're not stupid. Very few are stupid. Ignorant. Very. Because we have not figured out how to communicate. We got complexities problems. That's a 787 Max, 737 Max. How can you manage software? How can you deal with these kinds of things? How can you educate? I really wanted the cheesy crust. More and more complexity. More and more complexity. More and more complexity. So all of you say that it is in fact someone else is just not getting all of this. Someone else just doesn't understand this. It's actually different than that. Think about our own colleagues in academia around the country and around the world. Who designed all this? What are the theories that came from for this? Same us. There's nothing out there that didn't come from us. Nothing. The future. We already showed the video. Past that. And so let me talk a little bit about the future and then open it up for comments and questions. So we have to figure out how in this fledgling democracy called the United States and other places that are fledgling in their evolution also around the world, how can we actually build the philosophy, the tools, the systems, the designs, the decision-making mechanisms? And it probably doesn't mean engaging every citizen in whether or not we should do chemistry project X or Y, but it does mean engaging citizens in what is it that we want to be. But how do you do that before the public is capable of doing that, or how do you deal with the public of various levels of capability? And I'm not talking about intelligence, I'm talking about awareness. How do you make all of this work? And so my hope is that CSPO going forward can become more systematic in laying the philosophical underpinnings of what new science, policy, and outcome tools really need to be, can become more engaged in demonstrating models and outcomes, can become more engaged in new kinds of science and technological activities themselves by having CSPO engaged in lots of other, as they are now, scientific and technologically oriented projects, but can become a which we are, but even more so we need to be, a place where people go to think through, how do we do all this? Now this is really hard. Really, really difficult. And so it can't be a single institution. It can't be just faculty members working with other faculty members. It can't just be teams of people working between places. It has to be a new philosophical approach, a new philosophy, a new design, a new way of doing things. And then, as we're trying at ASU, even then changing even the ways that we're doing things at this institution. Now, some of you are sitting in a certain place where you can't see all the things that are going on, but there's a lot of experiments going on at ASU and a lot of new ways of doing things going on at ASU. But even that will be insufficient. So how do we engage even more broadly across the broader community? So how do you change things? Why don't we start there, just more of a dialogue. So how do you change things? Well, you have to take risks, as Dan talked about. You have to find new ways of thinking. You have to find people actually dedicated to the change itself as opposed to dedicated only to themselves, and that's difficult with faculty. You have to listen, yeah. You have to listen to lots of things. We're not particularly good listeners in the academy. Poor listeners, yeah.
I think we need to set up deliberate institutional feedback mechanisms. One of the things that I think has come out in a lot of the work that I've done at various points is that we don't pay attention to indicators when they show up because we're not institutionalized to look at those. And so, for example, one of the things we were, thanks, Cindy. One of the things we were talking about in the car on the way up this morning, Natural Nalini and I, is that graph that Dave showed, which has driven up that population at the bottom end, which is fantastic, and it's one of our sort of great outcomes so far, has also brought to campus people who do not have the family backgrounds of the average white suburban families. And they face challenges, and they're having mental health issues that are different from ones the university has traditionally been set up.
Yeah. The mental health issues, by the way, are across all populations. Our most struggling population is a child or a young adult with a B+ average from high school who comes from a wealthy family. That is the single most difficult thing we have within the institution.
But we need to be looking for these kinds of emergent outcomes that are challenging because we're trying to do system change. And then and then figuring out ways to respond to it.
So beyond the question, then questions from you all. I've got to take off and run. Nice to see everybody.